The book, Horror Story. There was a girl who loved to read very much. She especially liked books about magic and adventure. More than reading, she only liked to find new books that she had not yet read. She could spend an hour going through the bookshelves in the library, looking for something special. But with each book she read, it became more and more difficult to find books that turned out to be better than those she had read, and the girl spent more and more time in the library. One day she came across a book in an unfamiliar language. College en Rals eg mata agon skibantar x nad. The girl read. She looked at it again, and suddenly an incomprehensible phrase formed into understandable words. Agon's descendants have ruled the world for at least 10 centuries. The girl took the book home. When she opened the book again, the mysterious letters in the book began to dance and gather into words right before her eyes. Agon's descendants have ruled the world for at least 10 centuries. Our ships could be seen in all 9 seas, and every state on every continent paid tribute to the bronze-skinned Agonians, young boys and girls who were taken to the beautiful city of Aenora. The prisoners lived in Aenor as richer than all earthly kings, but on the summer solstice they were sacrificed to the gods, and no one else could see the golden towers of Aenora. The descendants of Aegon were strong, and only the treachery of the Demurians and the betrayal of the Lydians are guilty of the fact that the beautiful Aenora fell and the golden towers were destroyed. Only when evening came and it was impossible to distinguish the letters in the dark, the girl looked up from the book. But in her mind's eye, there were still pictures of the destruction of the beautiful city of Aenora. Tall Agonians with smooth bronze skin fought bravely, and some barbarians, like wild monkeys, attacked the Aenorians by the dozens, cut their throats, releasing blood and gouging out eyes as green as the sea. Beautiful Aegon women, with hair as long as silk, were tied up and thrown into the sea to be eaten by sharks and other sea reptiles, and even children were not spared. They smashed their heads with stone axes and heavy wooden clubs. The girl shuddered with horror, suddenly realizing that the ape-like barbarians were people, her ancestors. The girl turned on the lamp and continued reading. The Demurian magicians were weak, but there were many of them, and, by joining forces, they were able to overpower the gods of Aegon. The Lydian priests, who drugged our priestesses with a sleeping potion, broke into the temples, burned out the eyes and cut out the tongues of the sleeping women with hot lead, and the gods of Aegon watched powerlessly as their people died, and could do nothing. In all of Aenor had no one who could cast a spell summoning the gods who had long since left this world and ascended into the sky. Pala Aenora. Every single one of Aegon's descendants died. But one day, hundreds of years later, one of the Lydians will become, as before, a traitor, recite a spell and summon the ancient gods. And then the earth will tremble, the ancient gods will descend from heaven and sow death and horror, and the survivors will envy the dead. The girl turned the last page. Sarch. Kalnotar. The words came out of her mouth in spite of herself. Only now did the girl realize that the book was a trap. For many hundreds of years, this book has been waiting to be picked up by someone who is destined to betray his people and recite an ancient spell, as predicted by the gods of Aegon. The girl wanted to cover her mouth with her hands, but her hands wouldn't obey her. She tried to close her eyes so as not to see the written words, but her eyes did not obey her either. She wanted to bite her tongue, but she couldn't do that either. Talnoyar. Mathgadular. Darna Aegon. Hikare Aegon. Talma. The girl screamed out word after word, and each one seemed to take away a part of her life from her, so that she felt that she could die before she had finished reading the spell to the end. But the words ended, and the unknown force that bound the girl left her. The girl felt that her nose was bleeding, and probably from her ears too, as her neck became wet. But she didn't care. She didn't even have the strength left to be really scared. The book turned black, as if burning in a fire, and crumbled into ashes. Someone came into the room, said something, but the girl did not understand a word, and the faces, although there was something familiar in them, were strangers. "Ra'itan Aegon," said the girl, "hit Tom et R.A." And the earth trembled. Black Window, horror story. There was a girl in a small town. Not far from their house, on a wasteland overgrown with weeds and nettles, there were old ruins. It is not known what used to be here, a castle or a temple, but people in the city tried to stay away from this place. The children were also afraid of these ruins, but still sometimes came here, ran among the rubble and debris, pretending that they were not a bit afraid, although there was more fear than fun in their screams. Adults forbade children to play there, especially since a dead boy had recently been found in the ruins, but the more often they talked about it, the more the children wanted to visit the forbidden place. There were many scary stories about the ruins, about a bone monster, about a green fog that could suffocate, about a black window. The scariest story was about a black window that appeared right in the air, but almost no one could see it because it appeared only on moonless nights. But apparently someone still noticed a piece of blackness hanging in front of him, which differed from the black sky in that there were no stars visible in it. If you are not afraid and stick your hand into the black window, you can pull out a gold bar or an uncut gemstone, a diamond or a ruby. Although it is possible to lose an arm in this way. And sometimes they took their own or someone else's death out of the black window. Someone else's death just flew away, and if someone got their death, they immediately fell dead. The worst thing was for those who did not notice the black window and walked through it. They were then found in such a way as if they had fallen between two converging walls. The bones were crushed into small pieces. But all the children dreamed of sneaking into the ruins at night and finding a black window. Many carried a piece of rope and a triple hook made of thick wire to throw it through a black window and pull out gold or precious stones. One day, a girl and two of her friends went to the ruins after school so that no one would say later that they were cowards. They thought they could just take a peek and then leave right away. They were almost not afraid, because the sun was shining, and it was still far from evening. When the girls climbed into the ruins, they stopped being afraid at all, because there they met two boys from the neighboring yard. It was scarier to twist your leg or stumble and fall, running among the piles of old stones. After playing in the ruins, the children were about to leave, when suddenly one of the boys screamed, "The window! The black window!" The others ran up to the screaming boy and actually saw a square piece of impenetrable blackness hanging low above the ground. One of the boys was already tying a wire hook to a rope. The black window hung in the air, faceless and motionless, but still there was something menacing in it, which made the children huddle together and cast nervous glances towards the black canvas of hopeless darkness. "Maybe you don't need to," said one girl. "If you're scared, you can leave," the boy with the hook replied. "No one's holding you. And we'll take all the gold for ourselves, since we found this window." The boy went to the black window, unwound the hook and threw it into the center of the blackness, releasing the rope to its full length. "There is," he shouted, pulling the rope. "I've caught something." He pulled on the rope, and he had almost pulled it out completely, when suddenly something pulled the rope from the other side, so much so that the boy could not stand on his feet and fell right through the black window. Someone shouted. Another boy jumped forward, trying to catch a falling friend, but did not make it. "And what should I do now? Should I follow him?" he asked a moment later. The next moment, a huge bone hand poked out of the black window, trying to grab the boy, but he deftly crouched down and jumped back. The bone hand was gone. "I'm not going in there," the boy said, stuttering with fear. The girls were silent. Their faces turned chalk white from fear. "But he's there," the girl said, "and he needs our help. Did you see what came out of there?" Another girl shouted and began to cry. "He's been dead for a long time." As if to confirm her words, the black window disappeared. And a moment later, the children, as if only now realizing what had happened, ran screaming. After pushing through the weeds and not noticing the burns from the nettles, the girl got out of the abandoned wasteland and stopped abruptly. A car drove by, and a woman with bags was walking from a store on the other side of the road. The sun was shining, and music was coming from an open window somewhere. Everything was calm and peaceful, and what happened in the ruins seemed like a dream, albeit very scary, but quickly forgotten. The girl did not see any other children, but they could have run in the other direction. What are we going to tell his mom? The girl thought, but almost immediately forgot about it. She dusted off her clothes and went home. I had to do my homework. There was no black window, the girl thought, it just seemed to us. But before she had taken 5 steps, suddenly darkness opened up right under her feet. The Demon of the Desert horror story. There was a boy. He lived with his mom, dad, and little sister. Dad sometimes told me that his ancestors were nomads and once upon a time lived in the desert. And Grandpa could even tell you how to find water in the sand and take care of a camel. Do you remember Grandpa? Dad asked. We went to see him once. I don't remember, the boy replied. But in fact, the boy remembered the old man very well, who looked like a dangerous bird of prey and remembered his eyes like 2 pieces of dark ice. The boy was so scared then that he would have run away, but his legs froze like a stone and he did not move from his place. And Grandpa laughed out loud and said that such a weak child would not be able to survive in the desert. And he no longer paid attention to the boy. But the grandmother turned out to be very kind. She took the boy to the kitchen, treated him to some sweets and gave him a talisman, a bag with a stork embroidered on it. Don't show it to anyone, Grandma warned, not even Dad and Mom. Otherwise it won't work. What's in there? The boy asked his grandmother, twirling the bag in his hands. Chalk and ashes, Grandma replied. And then she told the boy a fairy tale about ancient demons living in the desert who crept up on sleeping people in the dark, strangled them and drank all the blood out of them. When these people were found in the morning, they looked like a dried up tree, Grandma said. My grandmother also told me how the inhabitants of the desert deceived the demons of the desert. They took small round stones, sprinkled them with white chalk and drew black dots with ash so that the stones looked like eyes. Human eyes are a treat for the demons of the desert, Grandma said, smiling, like sweets for you. But after eating the stones, the demons of the desert could not fly and people could catch and kill them. Is it possible to kill demons? The boy asked. Not for long, Grandma replied, but people will live 3 terms during that time. The boy didn't really believe in fairy tales, but he liked his grandmother's story. And the talisman was beautiful, even though the boy later lost it somewhere. The boy never saw his grandfather or grandmother again. But one day someone called Dad and said that Grandpa was dying. And Dad went to him. That night, the boy had a dream. He suddenly found himself in the desert and was being chased by a demon. Of course, the boy could not see the demon himself, but it seemed to him that someone's invisible eyes, cold as ice, were watching his every move. The boy had never met the demons of the desert, but this look seemed familiar to him. He ran for a long time, but when he collapsed into the sand, he still felt the demon's gaze. The boy wanted to cry, but under the scorching sun, the tears dried up before they appeared. Human eyes are a treat for the demons of the desert. Suddenly, as if in reality, the boy heard his grandmother's voice. And as often happens in a dream, he suddenly realized that all the time he was clutching his grandmother's talisman in his hand, a bag with a stork embroidered on it. The bag was sewn up, but when the boy pulled harder, the threads in the upper part of the bag immediately broke. There were 2 compartments in the bag. In one there was white chalk dust, in the other there was black ash. Right there, among the sand, the boy found many small round stones. He sprinkled the stones with white chalk and drew black dots with ash so that the stones looked like eyes. Then he piled up the stones and lay down next to them, closing his eyes. He was so tired that he fell asleep from exhaustion, but he was so afraid that he could not sleep. With his eyes closed, the boy lay on the hot sand and heard the wind humming and the sound of crumbling sand. The boy tried to say a prayer, but could not remember a word. He thought about his house, his mom and dad, but his head was empty, as if all the memories were covered with sand. And then something touched him, and with a scream, the boy jumped to his feet. "Quiet," said the man standing in front of him, "it's already over." He was short and wrapped in rags all over, even his face. Only the eyes were open. And now his gaze was carefully studying the boy. "You acted correctly and flawlessly," the man said, and even from the hoarse voice of the stranger, the boy could not determine who was in front of him, a man or a woman, a child or an old man. "Sometimes they become so strong that they can live in a human body," the unknown continued, "and when one body dies, they move into another, most often into the bodies of their human descendants. They are not easy to catch, because they are vulnerable only at the moment of transition from one body to another. But we were able to find a way to defeat them." The man took a step forward and handed the boy a strange rounded object. "This is a dry pumpkin," said the man, "and if the people of the desert carry the most valuable thing, water." The boy took the pumpkin. "You are a worthy son of the desert people. When you're really dying, we'll meet you here and bury your bones in the sand. But your great-grandchildren will have to face this demon again, and you'll be waiting for them here to help." The man turned his back and walked away, almost immediately lost in the sand. When the boy woke up, there was a dry hollow pumpkin in his hand, and the bed was full of hot yellow sand. It was only then that the boy realized how he knew that cold gaze of the invisible demon of the desert. His grandfather looked at him with the same icy gaze. Invisible horror story. One girl moved with her mom and dad to a new house. The house was old and very beautiful. The girl liked it very much at first. There were many rooms, and large trees grew right outside the windows. Mom and Dad showed the girl all the rooms in the house. "And we also have a basement," Dad said. "There's a sofa and a big TV, so you can watch movies like in a movie theater." They went down to the basement, but the girl suddenly felt sick. "It smells so awful in here," the girl said, and ran out of the basement. But the girl's mom and dad didn't smell anything. "Okay," Mom said, "you don't have to go to the basement if you don't like it." They began to live in a new house, and everything was fine, only the smell from the basement did not go away, but even seemed to become stronger. "It smells like death in a hospital," the girl was saying, "like someone died. Only worse." However, except for the girl, no one could smell it. Even the master was called, but his instruments did not find anything. "The air is clean, there are no toxic fumes," said the master, and drove away. But that wasn't all. In the new house, the girl began to have strange dreams. They had an alien and very ancient city, square towers of black stone, dark alleys, and overhanging houses. In this city lived creepy, ugly creatures covered with scales, with webbed feet and triangular heads like snakes. These creatures buried their dead in glass coffins, which they stacked in towers. The living came to the dead, cut their hands, poured blood on the glass lids of coffins, and listened to the dead tell them about the afterlife. In this city, the dead were called invisible. From these dreams, the girl woke up screaming, but could not tell what these unknown creatures were scaring her so much. However, she recognized that fetid smell from the basement. The same smell hovered in the dark towers of the ancient city. The girl began to dream about the ancient city more and more often, and the living became fewer and fewer, and the dead more and more. The city was collapsing, the towers were crumbling, and only the glass coffins with their terrible contents remained intact, lying in piles among the ruins. In her dream, the girl wandered alone among the glass coffins, trying to find a way out of the city, and the invisible ones turned their snake triangular heads after her. But one night the girl woke up in her room and could not recognize her. It seemed to her as if she was in a dark tower of a dead ancient city. And then she realized that her room was filled with a stench. Thin strands of scent stretched out from the basement like the tentacles of an unknown monster. "These are the invisible ones," the girl guessed. "They are looking for me." And by the smell, the girl realized that the invisible ones were very hungry. After all, those ancient creatures died out many years ago, and there was no one to pour blood on glass coffins. The girl got out of bed, and carefully, trying not to fall into the tentacles of the invisible ones moving in the air, began to make her way into the bedroom to Mom and Dad. But when she got there, she saw that Mom and Dad were dead. The tentacles of the unseen entwined them like huge worms and drank their blood. The girl almost started screaming out of fear. She had to put her hands over her mouth and bite her fingers until they bled. When the girl felt the salty taste of blood in her mouth, she suddenly realized what to do. After all, she couldn't kill the invisible ones. They had already been dead for a long time. The girl made her way into the kitchen, threw old newspapers on the floor that were lying on the refrigerator, took matches and set them on fire. When the fire broke out, the girl threw several more newspapers on top, opened the gas on the stove and climbed out through the window into the street. In the growing fire, she managed to see the tentacles of the invisible writhing in pain in the fire, and then the whole world disappeared in a fiery flash. When firefighters and police arrived, the house burned down completely. The police found the bones of 2 dead people in the ashes. The girl was taken to the hospital. She forgot everything, so she had to be taught to walk and talk again. She was taken from the hospital by her uncle and aunt, with whom she began to live. Sometimes the girl had nightmares with creepy, ugly creatures in glass boxes, and when the girl woke up, she drank special pills that the doctor prescribed for her, and quickly forgot these dreams. Old toys, horror story. There was a boy. He constantly broke all the toys that were bought for him. When Dad and Mom asked why he broke the toy, the boy replied, "I was wondering what was inside." Then they bought him a large construction kit, but the boy did not collect anything. "Boring," he said. And he continued to break his toys. Then he would tear off the soldier's legs and head. Then he would break the car. Then he would open up all the insides of the gun with a sound and lights. After that, Dad and Mom stopped buying him toys. And the boy began to take toys away from younger children on the street and deliberately break them so that they also did not have toys. And all the children in the yard stopped taking toys out of the house. One day the boy was bored on the street, and he went to an old construction site. It was said that a treasure had been buried there in the basement a long time ago. But so much garbage was thrown into the basement that it was difficult to find anything there now. The boy didn't need the treasure, he just wanted to shoot a rat in the basement with his slingshot. He even imagined how much fun it would be to bring a dead rat into the yard and scare the girls. But when the boy went down to the basement at the old construction site, it was so dark that it was impossible to see not only the rats, but even the floor under his feet. Although there were rats here, something was constantly rustling in the dark. There was a squeak, and sometimes you could even see the gleam of red rat eyes. The boy tried to shoot at those eyes, but never hit them. The rats turned out to be faster. "We need to get further away," the boy decided, and climbed into the darkness. Here the sounds became louder. Someone was stomping in the dark, scratching with claws, and even seemed to sigh and groan. The boy suddenly felt scared, and he thought that not only rats could live here. He decided to return, but could not find his way back and wandered for a long time in the dark, stumbling among the piled garbage. And those who lived here began to get closer. Now they were making noise from all sides, scratching, crawling, stomping, and making many more sounds, so that the boy began to feel as if there was some unknown creature with thousands of tentacles in the dark. The boy began to cry. "Stop it! Stop scaring me!" He shouted, but the darkness only erupted with new sounds. And suddenly something lit up in the dark. The lights were dim, but not scary, as if a New Year's garland had been lit in the distance. In the light of these lights, the boy saw that he was surrounded by strange, ugly creatures. They were old, dirty, broken, with severed legs and paws, broken parts, torn insides, where the gears still continued to spin. but some of them still have batteries inside. They lit up in the dark. "Who are you?" the boy asked fearfully. "We are toys," the creatures replied, and only then did the boy realize that he was surrounded only by old, discarded toys. "What are you doing here?" "We were broken and thrown away." The boy stopped being afraid. Who would be afraid of toys? "Hey, how do I get out of here?" "Follow us," said the toys, and moved into the darkness. The boy went after the glowing lights. But the toys did not lead him to the exit, but to some deep pit. The boy looked in there, but there was nothing to be seen in the darkness. It just felt like it was very deep there. And it smelled of mold and rot. The boy was scared again. "Where have you dragged me, you stupid toys?" he shouted. "I have to get out of here." "Upstairs, home." But the toys answered, "We'll throw you down. You'll break down, and we'll see what's inside you." And at once they moved closer to him. "Don't," the boy was scared and started talking again. "I won't do it anymore." The toys just stared at him in silence and moved closer again at once. And then the glowing lights went out, and the boy was left alone in the darkness and silence. He wanted to run, but he didn't know which way to go and was afraid of falling into a pit. "We need to sit down on the ground and move by touch," the boy thought. But then he felt something coming at him out of the darkness, and took a step back, not immediately realizing that there was no support under his foot, and he was falling down. And then the boy screamed.